So we're going to finish lesson 9.6. We're also going to cover lesson 9.7 in this video. This is on page 569 in your books. It's a very handy chart. I would recommend that you jot this down in some form in your notebook with a few extra pieces of information. Namely, so we're talking about when to solve, what method to use to solve a quadratic equation. And I'm kind of surprised they put graphing in here just because it's so inexact. I guess that's why they say only use it if you have a graphing calculator handy. We're going to focus on these other methods instead. Use square roots if the equation has no x term. So in other words, if it's a squared plus c. Factoring if you can factor it easily. I said that you could always complete the square. It's a little simpler if the coefficient, if the a term is 1. Quadratic formula will always work. The other thing that you need to know from lesson 9.6 is this right here, b squared minus 4ac, is the part of the quadratic formula that's under the square root sign. Take away the square root sign and just pull this out. B squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant of the quadratic formula. Helpful stuff to know. And why do we care? Well, because you can use this quickly to figure out if what the roots of the parabola are. Well, not what the roots are, but how many roots there are. So plug in the b term, the a term, the c term, and if this is equal to 0, there's one root in the parabola. If the answer to this is greater than 0, there are 2 roots in the parabola. And if the answer to this is less than 0, then there are no roots on that parabola. So now I'm moving on to 9.7. And very quickly, we've got 3 kinds of functions that we've been dealing with a lot this year. Linear functions, quadratic functions, and exponential functions. Now I'm going to say problem 1 kind of made me laugh because I really hope that this wasn't necessary to write out. Take a look at it. Basically what they're saying is if you plot some points without knowing what an equation is, can you look at the graph and figure out what kind of function it is? Basically, can you see that that's a line? And that's an exponential one, and that one's a parabola. I think you probably can. Now, here's something that's much more helpful and not glaringly obvious. If you take a table of values for a function, you know, where you have x and y and columns where you figured out what they both are, a table of values can be a useful tool for analysis, but only if the x values have a common difference. This and the stuff that follows it is stuff that you should have written down in your notebook. So remember what's a common difference. And you're going to look that up because I'm not going to tell you if you can't remember. If the y values also have a common difference, it's a linear function. If the y values have a common ratio, it's an exponential function. And this is where things get exciting. If the y values have a common second difference, then it's a parabola. What the heck is a common second difference? I will show you. Check out this chart. First of all, common difference in all the x values. Oh, I gave it away anyway. All right. The y values, there's clearly not a common difference the first time you go through, but then if you take the difference of this second set of numbers, so the second difference, look, that's a common difference. Those points plot a parabola. So this was a very, very short video, but there's a fair amount of thinking to do in these problems that come next. Finish 9.6, you're going to do page 572, 24 to 34 even, using the discriminant and figuring out which method you would use to find the solutions of a quadratic equation. And remember, graphing is really not a great solution. Then you're moving on to 9.7, and you're going to get some practice figuring out what sort of function you're looking at. I'd like you to do number 12 to 16 even, but do all three of those problems the same way. Use the same directions for number 16 that you use for number 12 and 14. I also want you to do number 21, parts A and B. You can do C if you like, but you do not need to.